Blessings, everyone, and welcome to our first live interactive interview. I have one of my dearest friends. Like, honestly, this man is going to blow you away. So, Hassani is, we had an interview. Gosh, I don't even know when that was. Do you remember?
June. It was
It was
June
in
last year.
June.
June. I was
And
back
it
in the
was
UK.
kind of, I don't even know how we stumbled upon each other. I think it was on Instagram.
Mm.
And I had no idea what to expect when we went into that interview, and it blew me away. And that's what the energy that I'm going to hold for today, too. This energy of how we both have the ability to read frequency and bring words and just navigate to where the divine takes us is pretty magical. And so I just want to honor you for being in a space where that is just a natural way for you to speak. And so before we go into our conversation today, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Jules, and
Mhm.
thank you for inviting me. It's a real honor to be here. Hello to your community as well. I'm Hassani Ade. I'm from England, from the UK, born in London, and currently based in Bangkok, Thailand. My work is around transformation and development. I'm an executive coach, so mainly entrepreneur executives. So I do a lot of work around mind-body optimization, firstly, but also around changing conscious patterns, subconscious patterns, and being able to create reality. So manifestation neuropsychology, because I'm also very interested in the bodily response of these patterns as well. So it's been interesting, and time spent between Bali and Koh Phangan and spiritual communities, really has kind of left its mark on me in some way. So now I kind of bring that into the more 3D world and help executives to do their thing, overcome hurdles and also inspire their teams. So a mixture of teams, mixture of individuals, but really it's about creating safe spaces for authentic expression and yeah, meaningful discourse actually as well.
Mm. Yeah, you're doing amazing work. And just the consciousness that you hold behind what you do, I feel like is worth going into. And that was kind of our topic today. I don't remember exactly what the topic was, but it was basically tools of consciousness and ascension. And so I'm going to let you kind of kick off with where you want to start it, and then we'll just unravel all the
Okay.
layers.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that you sent some bullet points, right, on for this in the invitation, and I kind of scanned through them, and I think I was also just kind of meditating on those words, right? Tools for inner and collective evolution, and I think what comes to my mind was really something like we're recognizing the changes that are taking place, and we're going through our own inner process of transformation to match what's changing in the collective, right? And it's a recognition of us all as individuals, forming part of that collective, and what can we then do to support the evolution of consciousness on the planet in some sense, right? So that's kind of what came through, and then naturally there's going to be conversation around mind body optimization and keeping the tuning fork of the energy system alive and resonant with what really wants to be expressed and come through. So themes around that, and also about how we relate to each other as well, right? To
Mhm.
to actually bridge the gap to form that collective consciousness. And we're seeing a fragmentation now of different lines of thought and experience and ways of expressing ourselves. And then how do we bring that together to recognize that we're not necessarily alone in this game of life? So that's kind of what came through when I was kind of thinking more about that title that just kind of came out of nowhere. That fortunately wasn't Chat GPT generated. It's like an actual original thought that for a change. So I was happy about that, and also Jules, thank you as well, because the channeling of that title, right? That was with you in mind, right? So
Mhm.
so it's really about how do we approach this from different angles and sides. And I think that's why it became more significant and I think appropriate to have a group channel conversation event around this as well. So keen to hear if you have any perspectives or what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I love the way you kind of brought that and saw all the different angles. And I feel like when maybe where we start is with the self, right? Because where we're holding all of those different aspects is going to create our personal reality, but then extends into the reality because we all know that what we focus on becomes reality. And so we always want to make sure that we're starting in the highest frequency that we're able to hold. And I know that the more conscious we can be in the highest frequency that we can hold, the more that we start to break through maybe those limiting beliefs or judgments. And I think that that might be a great place to start because when we start to attach to a program, that's a lot of times what we notice right away is that we're naming something as good or bad. And that could be an indicator to pull back and kind of go back into that higher frequency and become an observer. So I'll let you
Mm.
reflect a little bit on that.
Well, yeah, I think, if we're talking about developing consciousness, we're talking about how we express ourselves, right? And there has to be some contemplation that takes place around that, right? Because it isn't something that's purely outward focused. It's we have to find it inside of ourselves first, and then it becomes expressed. And then when it's expressed, it then becomes reflected off of something in the environment, in the world, right? That could be a member of family, a romantic partner. It could be, just a situation that happens on the streets. But, you know, we're finding a version of ourselves. We're tuning into a self-concept, whatever it is that wants to be expressed in that moment. And this is why it's interesting looking at the fragmented sides of self, and then what do those sides need necessarily, right? And how are those being expressed, and when are they being expressed? So then, once you identify all of that, all of those aspects, the environment is the testing ground, the training ground for that expression, right? And I think what's interesting about the turn of 2025 is that I think that this era now is really going to be about revealing, right? Revealing, expressing, bringing to the surface, what may have been hiding in the shadows or unreachable previously. I think that now, humanity is at this point where we're really needing to show up, for ourselves and also for each other. So I think when looking at all of this, it's just a question of what really is true expression, what really is true self. And I think that we experience that through the reflections that come back, the feedback that comes back, how we tune into, how we reflect on what was said, what was felt, what that pattern looked like, and is it coming from a place of authenticity, or is it a program? Is it someone else? Is it just a pattern, or is it all just going past completely unconscious? So, I think when we're looking at, these tools for inner and collective evolution, it's really about what am I willing to actually look at? Like, what am I actually going to look at? What am I actually willing to see in myself that perhaps I might want to see, but through the process of seeing it and allowing it to become conscious, that's how we are able to really take a firm handle on who we actually are, right? So yeah, that's what comes to mind immediately. I wonder if anything in there tickled something for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love everything that you said. And and just kind of tuning back into some of us that are, I can see little faces up here that are listening, and knowing that to do everything that you just said is really the practice, right? Because our awareness is always the first step. And then where we're actually creating that awareness from, I would say, is almost just as important because if we're
Mm.
gaining awareness through a program, it's just going to continue to loop within a program. But once we have the awareness, we have the opportunity to move out of that. And that's where I really see this year of the nine actually being what it is. And that's the ability to master the matrix, master the illusion, master programming. And so with those tools of attuning consciousness. And that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about is recognizing what consciousness actually is. Because I think so
Mm,
often we identify as consciousness. We identify what we become the observation of. And the truth is that consciousness is just a tool, and that we're actually the intelligence of the purity that's the opportunity to move into once we become conscious of something. And so in this case, we could be talking with a friend and they're saying something, and there's a little bit of this little thing inside that's either lighting up and expanding because you're meeting in the frequency of the reflection of purity, or it could be that your frequency starts to drop and you're like, I wonder what that's about. But either way, it's information. One is reflecting a space of purity where you get to go in and explore consciously what that looks like in your life. Or it could be, oh, there's information here. It's not about judging it as good or bad. I'm willing to look at that and then move back into that purity because that's always where we can go. And that's what I love about how you expressed or you actually said the words that we express and then information is bounced back. So I call it the feedback loop, right? It's like once we choose to bring something into the world, whether through intention or even just having a conversation, it's going to bring us feedback on how we're holding purity and what it is that we're saying. And I believe that we're all holding the most advanced technology in our DNA, and that technology is directly in alignment with the intelligence of source. And the more that we use our consciousness to attune to that intelligence, the more life just becomes the feedback of how close or how far we are from
mm,
our consciousness being held there. And then once we recognize that, life becomes kind of magical because then it's always this treasure hunt of moving back into the intelligence. So I'll let you reflect on that.
mm. Yeah, I like that, the treasure hunt, right? Because there are so many parts of our experience that may take us out of alignment for a period of time,
Mhm.
right? And it's that kind of coming back to purity, as you mentioned that, coming back to purity, which is well, it's the goal and it's also the home, but
Mhm.
it's also the place from which we move into the world, right? So it it's a place where we go to, but we can't stay for too long because there's always things in our environment that try to pull us around and pull us away, right? So it's tuning into what really is the reflection of truth that I'm finding inside at that time. And does it change? Does it not change? I'm not entirely sure, but I think it evolves insofar that we're willing to actually look at it and pay attention to it. So levels of consciousness and awareness, we can think of that as how much time or how much conscious effort or was there a willingness to actually go to that place of silence to find that purity or not? And we're living in a world now which is really trying to take us away. Social media, for example, is a great example of that, where the whole game is to take the individual away from his or herself, right? The whole game is to remove the person from purity and to take that consciousness, to take that awareness away somewhere else, right? And we risk being, well, say risk, I mean, we already are effectively being programmed to some extent, by a narrative that we didn't necessarily sign up to, right? So being pulled into it, being pulled away from that sense of purity is something we have to just be aware of that's happening. And I think it always has been happening and it always will happen. But it's about finding those places, communities, and also places in self where we can actually be honest about what that purity really looks like, what it really is, where it really is, and I want to express that. Because I think also as well, there's individuals that will find the place of purity, but trying to stay there. and maintain that frequency can be quite difficult in an environment where they may feel isolated in that purity, right? And
Mhm.
you know, I think also speaking from personal experience here, it's something like trying to stay in that frequency can be quite difficult because if you can't necessarily find others who are in that frequency or can't find anything that you can relate to from that frequency in the environment, then it can become quite difficult. But I think that what's really required is having that trust and knowing that the purity that we're speaking about, that will always find its way back to itself, right? It will always find a way to merge with, connect with, become resonant with aspects of the environment that match that frequency, that purity. Okay. So I think in summary, it's something like everything's trying to take you away from it, but you have to do the work to find your way back. And once you go back, it gets stronger. And I guess I'd like to say it becomes easier, but that isn't necessarily true because the Matrix is always trying to find new ways to play tricks on us, right? Yeah. What do you
That
think
was
of
so deep.
that?
I love you. I could tell you really went in and spoke from your experience on that. And one place where I personally, and I can remember just, it was a struggle to hold a high frequency and it did feel lonely. And when I finally shifted my perspective of, oh, life is not only the playground, but it's the training ground.
Mm,
And then it actually became fun. And one of the things I would do before I would leave the house is I would say that I'm going to have my experience today from my high self to every person that I interact with from their high self. And so
mm,
I set the intention to go out into the world of meeting beyond the matrix and to have interactions. And then within that, if I started to notice that I was going into judgment or oh my frequency is dropping or oh I didn't like that or oh like sometimes it's just oh I would be like oh no have this experience from my high self to their high self and everything would actually shift because it gave my consciousness somewhere to go and that is really what I see this year being all about is that the matrix is there to be broken and
mm,
it is the training ground and that it's an opportunity of ascension and that when we approach it as it's actually helping us and we're the ones that created
mm,
it in order to ascend it actually becomes fun, right? Because we
mm,
have the focus is moving to that space. But of course, doing that with others that also see the world in that way makes it a lot easier because we have those reflections that we can go to. And just like what we're doing right now, it's you can't maybe just talk to everybody off the street in this space. But we can talk to everybody on the street from our high selves to their high selves and experience what the matrix is and what it's not just by a shift of consciousness.
mm. Well said. Very well said. Very well said. Yeah, I want to riff on that now because you kind of mentioned a little bit more about, well, what came to my mind was that you're mentioning more about taking that consciousness with you into the world, right? Bringing it with you into the world. That's really, really interesting, okay? Because it's so easy when you're on the yoga mat, or in ashram or at a spiritual retreat, but how do you stay in that frequency when you're out in the real world or the training ground as we just talked about, right? And I think it's something to do with confidence in that frequency and knowing that it can support and protect us, right? And you know, I do have a little game that I play, right, where I'll go to like a mall, for example, and just like smile at people, right, and just be like, "Hi," and they're so like confused, like, "What?" But then there's a shift does take place in them, where some kind of calculation, some kind of shift takes place, some kind of transformation happens, right, in the mind of the individual. Not always, but sometimes. It's like, oh wait, and then they kind of catch catch the frequency, right? And they're like, okay, now I feel great too. It's like wow, and I find it quite interesting how we can kind of just nudge the matrix a little bit, just kind of give it a little nudge, and just kind of just in the right direction, and of course with love. But I think it does become quite entertaining because eventually you get to a point where you just trust yourself and you trust the source that guides you, right? So it's like, well, anything out of resonance with that, is effectively invisible to me, and I can still show up in my wholeness and kind of add a little twinkle to kind of just to add a little bit, and just kind of see where that lands or who that lands for. So, I think it's not a solo, it definitely is not a solo sport, you know, ascending consciousness. It's something that we can propagate and share and transmit in different ways, of course. And I like what you said there about, yeah, the matrix does keep on changing and tries to pull us away, but that's actually what will separate the wheat from the chaff in some sense, right? Because the matrix always, those who control it and those who are incentivized by its existence will always find new ways to entangle and manipulate human consciousness. That's just part of the game. But I think when we embark on that journey of connecting to source and trying to have a undisrupted connection to that energy, I think that consciousness will always it will always be advanced, it will always be ahead, right? And that's why solutions for ascension, the tools for inner and collective evolution will always be available to us because the game needs to get more difficult, but it only becomes as difficult as we're not willing to go in to find the information to go up, something like that.
No, that was so well said. It kind of reminds me of something I was talking about yesterday of just kind of tapping into that space of what's manifesting our reality, right? And we are conscious beings, and the in consciousness or our thoughts or what we're projecting or expressing is creating our reality. And, we have different entities that are doing that, if you were just going to put that word to it. And it's interesting. I have to share this before I finish that thought. So hopefully I'll remember it. But when you were talking and you were saying something about like the consciousness, and so there's like this collective consciousness, and then it's our personal experience of consciousness within our own experience with the intelligence. And then there's this other collective space. And I had this vision come through of just it is just one intelligence, right? And so within that one intelligence, because we are all conscious beings, that we're going to be creating more of a collective experience. But the more of us that start to tune in for the truth instead of looking in our environment for the truth, that organically is going to change the expression of how our reality is shifting. And then within that, if enough of us are doing it, it actually just organically also shifts collective consciousness. And anyways, I
Yes,
just thought it was interesting. I'd never really seen it exactly that way. I feel like I've said these exact words, but I just energetically saw it in any way when you were speaking, and it just fascinated me. But
good.
in that, as we start to create from that place of purity, as we start to learn to not find the truth within the illusion, but to see elements of what we need to see in order to ascend within ourselves. And so we go in for the answers so we can see the reflection for what needs to be processed, if you will. But then we always go to the intelligence for the answers. And in that, the world starts to shift, and the better we get at that, or the more that we master our training, the less of a gap there is between consciousness and the intelligence until we actually start to express that intelligence. And then we experience whatever it is that that's going to be. But there
Yeah.
is a space where how pure we're holding consciousness within the intelligence of source is going to also be how fast we see manifestations come through. And the
Sure.
less there's a gap between there, there's less frequency between the purity of that and the not purity of that. And so I feel like that's part of the fun too, is when things that we're trying to, if you want to put the word manifest there, what's reflected back in that is information on where to go to be closer or in more purity of there. And then, and even in that, it becomes fun. So whether you're just seeing this on a collective level of the world and bringing the world into peace, or on an individual level, it's still that training ground.
Mm,
That
mm.
made
Thank you. Yeah,
sense.
yeah, that made sense. Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm very eager to riff on that, given the sense that it made, because I okay, a few things come to mind based on on that, and I was trying to articulate in my mind, okay, what is purity and what is the matrix? That's kind of what I was
Mm.
kind of resolving in my mind as you were speaking there, and the answer that came through was something like the matrix. The matrix is fear. The matrix is fear. The matrix, a way to look at matrix, the way to look at it in an embodied experience is something like fear. That's kind of the best I've kind of got in this moment around describing it, because there's of course there's various ways that that can be delivered, right? Through impatience or through worry or through anything technological, right? Or some kind of control mechanism. But I think ultimately the supposed end point, right? The goal of the matrix is to take the individual out of a sense of trust into fear, right? And then purity, I would describe purity as a sense of trust, truth, knowing, love. That's how I would kind of define purity, along with the other question I was asking was, how do you get to purity? So when we're talking about manifestation, right? The the action, the retarding force, resistance to expressing a manifestation, right, is effectively worry. It's fear. It's not trust. It's non-trust. And if we can find our way back to inner trust, find our way back to knowing, and let go of the worry, let go of the impatience, let go of the fear, let go of any kind of attachment to how something should be, because we can acknowledge and recognize that the manifestation is effectively our source seeking its expression through experience, something like that.
Mm.
And if we're attached to an outcome, or if we have worry or fear about it, or if the matrix is introducing into information into our awareness that will make us go into a state of fear, it becomes very, very difficult to really listen and get close to intuition, to get close to the expression, the embodied expression of source intelligence. So this is part of why I have the interest with the body, right? Because the body is this resonant tuning fork that we can use to experience consciousness, to have a felt experience of consciousness. And I think it's one thing thinking in terms of love and light, but when it's actually embodied, when it's felt and embodied, we know, right? And I think that maintaining this frequency, maintaining this awareness of truth, of patience, of love, of understanding, of compassion, like really holding ourselves in that state and not letting ourselves get pulled away by worry or fear from the matrix, from the world around us. I think that is what keeps us most in alignment, most in harmony with the intelligence that seeks to bring forth manifestations. And
Mhm.
then the next part of that, the logical next step of that is just how that intelligence expresses itself as a function of time, right? Time and cause and effect. So this is what we're up against. We're up against entities, let's just say, right, or institutions as well, let's just say, that want to manipulate us into a state of fear, to have an embodied experience of fear for the purpose of taking us out of frequency, out of love, out of presence, to disrupt our manifestation abilities. So that's something which I've been contemplating a lot recently.
Mhm. So where I'll reflect back and then we're going to open it up to the community. So I feel like there's I always every time I hear or even in my own voice when I'm like, oh, this is because of this or this is doing this. I have this saying, I am, oh, just turn it inside out. And so what I'll do is I'll take whatever it is, I'll bring it into that frequency and then I'll turn it on and then I project the frequency of what is it really. And what you could say is, oh, is the glass half empty or half full? Is because I personally I think the Matrix is a game and that it can be and there's going to be players or actors within the game, but they are no more relevant than the game itself. And that's when it doesn't mean that we don't see, oh, that's the villain of the game, right? It doesn't mean that we don't see that there may be manipulation happening, but we are the most advanced technology that there is. And it is evolving whether or not we're actively participating in that or not. And that frequency of source trumps everything. And that's what it is to break the matrix, right? And that for me this year is the opportunity to not go from the nine back to the one, not to just have it be another leaping cycle of evolution, but to actually master the matrix. And when nine reflects nine, or God reflects God, source reflects source, and that's where our consciousness is constantly seeing everything as we move into the 11. And then we're in mastery. And that's when the world is going to change. And we only need a few people to do that this year, right? So if we're going to put things on timelines, is that's when we do it. But we can't do that from a place of saying that the matrix is doing this or the matrix is this, because then it gives the power to the game. And so it's time to take back that power and actually, regardless of what the game is, that we choose to be in the expression of source. And one of the ways that I found the easiest way to do that is turn it inside out. Just turn it inside out and then see what it is. So another way of saying is that, oh, put that into the frequency source. What is it from there? And then we're always moving our consciousness into the purity of what's being shown because God is in everything. It's where we're holding consciousness in the illusion that is creating the matrix. Okay, so with that, I'll let you respond really quickly and then we'll open it to the community.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely noticed a shift, and yeah, a lot of satisfaction that came from what you shared there about taking back the power from the Matrix, and how we can turn it inside out and recognize and also see source in it, right? How we can also see source in the Matrix as well, because it's all a one manifestation ultimately, so it's not good or bad. It's just an expression of consciousness, and a question of how much and to what extent are we individually and collectively going to get entangled in that expression, in that illusion, right? And finding our path through, finding our way through, finding our way back home. Yeah. So yeah, we can open it up.
Okay, let's do it. Okay. So I'm gonna go to gallery here. All right. So Betsy, we'll start with you.
Today's my first day. I figured out after 8 months how to raise my hand.
It was perfect timing.
New skills. I don't have much to say, but I'm like, I don't know, my hand, I'm at my office and a little more encumbered, I guess, with what I'd say loudly. But I just want to say I did write down these things. I don't know if this is something anyone can see, but right at the beginning of our session today, I just got like the tuner bit, like almost like the X of a tuner, like the point, like a heart and stuff. I'm just like drawing. I'm not going to talk so much. And then I thought that trees for me, I'll speak. I'll speak. When I feel externally, personally, I wonder if anyone agrees that when I look at a tree or some sort of maybe nature in some way, I do feel I get an external perfection reflection.
Mhm.
And that's why I often need to do that when I feel off or unaligned. And I often have felt that in my life where I'm like, it's as if trees are my family in a strange way. Like if I really feel off, that comfort and that reflection internally. But in any case, and then the other thing I just wanted to know from this lovely man, Hanas,
Hasani, hi.
Hasani,
Nasi, thank
Hasani,
you.
Hasani, because I read it prior to this, but I've got it. Hasani. That the matrix to me at this moment from this wonderful, enlightening energy sharing with all of you, it feels almost like a house of mirrors. Like I'm starting to think it's like it really is just reflecting something in me and that I want it. I love the support of all of this energy from other whatever we are, embodied energy on the earth, also to help steer that way if I can't hug a tree in the middle of my day. That's all I wanted to say. Maybe open it up for anyone else.
Did
That's
you
it.
have a reflection
Thank
on
you for
that?
sharing.
Do you have a reflection for that?
Do I have a reflection? Well, just first, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I like to always something I do in my community chats is when a person shares from the group, to always just say thank you for sharing. Um, and actually, quite interestingly, it's quite powerful because that's also a reflection, like saying thank you for sharing, right? It's recognition of what's being exchanged, right, in the moment. And I'll just
Mm,
say the the comment you made on nature and trees, it makes complete sense because a tree is an unadulterated form of expression of consciousness, right? Nature, and you know, going to a forest versus going to a shopping mall, right? That's kind of it's quite a significant difference. So that makes complete sense, and I think we can also we can find that reflection if we look for it, right? And I think we can get just very in the head around things, pressures, time, expectations, and that can take us out of that state of recognizing reflection, right? So I think it comes back to slowing down and
mm,
also, yeah, looking around, because the world is always trying to reflect us. Obviously, it's easier when we're in nature or in the forest, for example, right? But I think we also can be stewards of that reflection. We can also show up in the environment as the biggest mirror, and of course, no competition, but it's it's definitely an act of vulnerability, and sacrifice in some sense to show up as a mirror for others and for the environment as required. Yeah. So
That was
Thank
great.
you so
you want to say
much. And
something?
also the mall thing, I really feel like that is more of like an elevated, like almost bringing the energy back down into the earth because the mall, I don't like malls normally, but I'm going to practice that because I mean, I honestly, I don't, e- I have, I can count. like in my life. But the point of that is that avoidance and just going into the mall. And I love that as an exercise. So thank you. Honestly think that could have elevate my, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's good practice. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Jody.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. It's always a little tricky for me. I kind of want to start by saying, just like, I just want to capture the moment of how stunningly beautiful it is that there's like almost 40 of us here doing this in this moment, because that vibrationally is just, I mean, not only a gift, but pretty darn powerful. Um, so I'll just say that the way I hold this year is that up until this point, at least in this incarnation, which is the only one I personally remember, is I was born into a landscape where the way in which my expression found its way was in what we're calling the matrix, the reflection. So I go out, it reflects back to me. I go out, it reflects, which is an aspect, I think, of being in a body on planet Earth. Totally get that. We're all, and we talked a lot about that today, which it's beautiful. It's such a great gift. I think the opportunity for the work we're doing in this community, which actually this conversation just makes me so joyful to be here and in this community, actually with Jules, with the work we're doing here, is it's a different way of engaging consciousness and engaging expression, which is an inner dialogue expressed out. That's actually, there's a difference. It's like the 1 to the 2 to the 3 to the 1, or just the 1. Do you know what I mean? Or just here. It's like, it's literally like the opportunity is for this, guys. Do you know what I mean? And we're doing it. We're actually doing it in this community. So, I'm sorry. What's the name of the speaker? I'm sorry. Is it Dasani?
I'm so
What's the
sorry.
name of who's I can't like, I'm like flying in space. I'm sorry if I don't remember your name. Sorry. But I'm just saying, like, I invite you into our community, I think, to have some experience of this other experience, this thing that we're doing here, which is technically, I mean, if you think about it, guys, it's based in symbol. There's actually no story. That's the opportunity to, it's something, it's a different way of engaging reality. Anyway, that's why I'm holding it. So throw it out there for the heck of it.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Jody. That was beautiful. Uh, there was just one little thing that I would like to reflect on in that, and I don't even know if this was your intention, Jody, but when you went to the symbol and because I truly enjoy the technology of using scalar waves and the purity of activating the DNA, and how when we bring it into mathematical sacred geometry, if you will, just if we were going to name it as something, but the technology was actually given to me through the intelligence of source, that when we start to actively participate in activating that frequency inside of our DNA, then our consciousness just organically shifts, because our consciousness will identify impurity over the matrix every time if we practice that. And so I just want to reflect that. Okay, so good. Do you have a reflection on that?
Yeah. I mean, I was just kind of marinating in the, in the idea there with the DNA. Yeah. Again, big thank you, for sharing. It just says iPhone. I can't see it. Sorry. But yeah, it's a collective sport ultimately. they were participating in. And I think that what's really good about this time is that we can now do it together, and it can be celebrated in some sense. And we all come from different walks of life in different parts of the country and the world, and yet we've still been able to find each other, right? So that's really, really significant, really important to look at, because these lights, of awareness that are turning on, as people figure out their way through the matrix, let's just say, right? So as we come and find each other, life is only going to become more and more interesting and more enjoyable. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna take. We'll see if we can make these fast, because I want to open a space for you to do an ending process. I'm really curious what's going to come through you on all these
So
conversations.
am I.
Okay, Sandy.
Hasani, I wonder if you could restate this or expand on it, because what happened when you expressed it is that it gave me a beautiful higher truth that was so real, and I want to hear it again. And that's what you had said about the pure, almost like saying the reason that we have taken a body and that we're here is because of the divine wanting to express through us. So, do you remember what you said? I mean, it's like take all of the matrix, take all of everything we know away, and we're here to do is to be an expression for the divine to express through creation. So, could you restate that? It turned me on.
Gladly, yeah. I mean, yeah. Thank you for touching on that point, because I think when I'm speaking, sometimes it's kind of coming through, and I'm just kind of watching things moving inside of me, and I'm just trying to put words to them. And I think it's something like, yeah, it's basically something like, hey, the whole point of having a body and having a lived experience, is for the sake of experience as such. And conscious can exist as an amorphous cloud of potential, or it can be embodied, right? In the human, right? And this is what I think we have the opportunity and the gift, to obviously experience. And of course, there's various shades and flavors of experience, some more enjoyable, some less enjoyable. But I think that the point is that we are here to experience it, compared to it being an amorphous cloud of potential, right? Floating around in some universe somewhere. We have the experience of an embodied self, and all the benefits and challenges that come with that. Because, I like to think of, consciousness, the mind, personality, ego, self, as different layers of lenses and filters and shields. And we're removing these shields one by one by doing that inner work, by finding truth, by finding source inside. And then the light that wants to come through, the electricity, the spark of life, right, that we all share in this room today, right? It's coming through different filters and different lenses. And we're all unique in that. Speaking again to DNA, right? That light of consciousness is being expressed uniquely through each version of life, through each and every individual, for each human. And this is the gift, and this is the opportunity, ultimately, to find out, if we remove all those shields and lenses and layers and filters, if we remove those blockages, what does that light actually look like when it's expressed? I think that's what really interests me. Yeah. So I hope that kind of helps further your thinking around this.
Thank you.
That was well said.
Thank you,
For
Sandy.
sharing. All right. Rosemary, we'll end with you.
Okay, I'll be quick. I really appreciated the story of the malls. For me, it's when I sit on the airplane, because I always make a point of getting an aisle seat. And I sit there and I beam love and light through my smile to every individual that goes past me. And I just love doing it. And it's been very intriguing, the responses, the different responses I get. But I love what you said about the different lenses, because something happened to me last week that really pulled me out of where I wanted to be. And so in looking at it that evening, I really my thought process was, what eyes do I want to look at this with? Do
Mm,
I want to look at this through my ego eyes, my human eyes, or do I want to look at this from the divine intelligence eyes? So
mm,
it's either or. Do I want to look at it this way, or do I want to look at it this way? And I always want to choose to look at it the higher. And so that changes my focus, and I can focus on what is it I need to do to get here. And then everything else collapses. So it's literally, it's funny. Because it resonates a little bit with polarity. It's either or. It's either, do I want to stay here in the humanness, or do I want to stay up here? And I want to stay up here. So
mm.
that's my parting words. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
Jules,
you.
do you have something to add to that perspective? Because I definitely have something.
Oh, I'll let you go. I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for sharing. Um, and I think that when I think of when I think of what happens, if I try to kind of model what happens when we're keeping ourselves in a state of high frequency and choosing love, over attachment or fear, right? For example, we're reaching high, we're cutting through, we're using some inner discipline to find that frequency, that which was closest to source, right? When I model that and think about that, it's almost like playing Tetris and all the blocks just clearing, 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 everything just clearing. And certain frequencies, for example, jealousy or anger, doesn't really clear the blocks. But if we find that source frequency, everything just clears, because we're interacting with the quality of intelligence that purifies and cleanses and creates space, right? So again, with the lenses, if we choose to look at it through the lens of source, the lens of love, for example, we can actually clear and clarify the the space that may be chaotic or challenging or difficult. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy, but I think it's helpful to recognize that if we look at something with the same lens or the same frequency that it comes to us, for example, something challenging or difficult, if we're looking at it through an ego lens or through a lens of some kind of otherness, or it becomes very difficult to come back. It becomes difficult, and we have to do the work anyway to go up and to cut through and to find that source frequency again anyway. So the more ready we are to do that, I think the smoother the process of clearing those blocks to create that space again, to experience wholeness.
That was beautifully said. And what I think this is the perfect way to just kind of move into the process. But this is my biggest passion, is just where we ended, is that we don't have to go in and create a story in order to shift. We just have to know that we're in the story to shift. And then once we're aware of that, we can move into that intelligence. And then the practice is how to get from there to here, right? It's not about looping in what was shown to us. We don't have to loop into it. We just have to know that it was shown and then learn to move our consciousness into the purity of source. Because when we do that, just like what you said, none of the rest of it even exists. So the practice then becomes, am I holding my consciousness here or here? Because the more we continue to shift to here, the more that reality is created. And now we have science to back this up, that it's not necessarily helpful to play in the matrix more than you need to. It's only there to see where you are so that you can move back into source. And then, of course, like you said, it's the practice of getting from here to there. So with that, I'm going to pin you to the top here, and I'm going to let you just do, it can just be like 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be long. And oh, let me remove you here, remove, and then we'll just end here, and we'll let you do a little shout out at the end of how people can connect with you as well.
Sure, sure. Okay. Well, I guess I invite everyone to close their eyes. Let's all close our eyes. Let's put a hand on the heart, or two hands, whatever is comfortable, or even no hands. Just find a seating position where you feel safe and comfortable ultimately, and allowing the breathing to deepen, allowing the breath to deepen. Find that diaphragm breath in the belly, just softening into the moment. Nowhere to be, nothing to do, just being here in the now, in the potential, at the edge of the unknown, and recognizing that it's in the unknown, in that place where we may not go to often, but we can find greater expansion and further truth. Recognizing that the light which illuminates that space of the unknown, that light does not go out. It's always available. But of course, to increase the brightness of that light, we come to this place of stillness. Taking a deep breath, exhale, and just softening further into this truth. Recognizing that all questions shall have answers. All potential realities shall be resolved. All we have to do is find patience. That patience which illuminates all spaces and brings us back to self. It's also in that space that we create inside, where our manifestations, the truth which seeks to be expressed, finds its way through. So we can find joy in this place. We can find laughter. We can find wholeness. And our work then is to bring that with us, share it with the environment around us, that we can give that gift of light to all with whom we meet. Nothing is lost, because we know we can always find our way back home. Deep exhale. And just resting for a few moments here. learning to be okay with the stillness. Bringing awareness now to the heart center, resting the gaze of consciousness on that place which seeks to express. And from here, just going to bring some light motion into the neck, roll the shoulders, breathe in deeply, and exhale. And when you feel ready, you may open your eyes. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Nasi, that was amazing. I'm trying to find a way to pin myself back up. All right. I would just want everyone to just stay in this lovely place that you just created. But just let you give a little shout out of where people can connect with you before we get off
Yeah,
today.
sure. I'll just put my Instagram handle here. Yeah, I mean, I post on Instagram quite a lot. Um, and I have a website as well, hasaniadi.com.
And I'll
But
put the
really,
links in the show notes too. So if
yeah,
everybody
be fine.
wants to just know that they'll be there for you as well. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much for just playing in this container that was just so beautifully created and everybody's contribution of their frequency. It's always so beautiful to see what comes through when so many of us come together and bring our love and our light and our wisdom. It's always such an elevation of frequency. So I just so appreciate you. You know how much I love you, man. You just every time you blow me away,
likewise.
I appreciate you.
Likewise. Jules, just beaming so much love your way, really. I think it was in our first conversation. I think I was just really blown away and also just kind of very grateful, to be able to connect with you in that direct manner, because I think it was like, wow, somebody else can actually articulate consciousness, in this way. And I was like, oh my God, like, wow, this is, because I think that when, yeah, sure, we go through our process of development and evolution, but then to greet someone in that space is well, it's extraordinarily significant. So, I'm truly grateful for this connection, and just everyone that's joined today. Really, thank you so much for being here, because we created this together. Really, we're just facilitators, we're stewards. We're holding the space as hosts, but this is all of us that's created this. So, just so much love to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone for being here. And we'll have
It's
this
impressive.
up for everyone to enjoy. And I know, wasn't that fun? I don't even know how that
How
happens.
did you do? How did you do what? Why can't I do that?
I don't know, it just happens. All right,
Jules
everyone. Thank
magic.
you. Love you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Okay, how do I close?
I'll get it.